Sister Sarah Matthews stared at the fresh bloodstains behind the bookshelf in Hampton Mansion's library, her heart pounding. The red marks stood out against the dark wood, impossible to miss in the morning light. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, noticing a bloody handprint on one of the old leather-bound books. Just 2 days ago, she had been at St. Mary's Orphanage, teaching children when Mother Superior called her into her office. The news hit her like a punch to the stomach. Her grandmother, Eleanor Matthews, a woman she barely knew, had died under suspicious circumstances. "Eleanor left you everything, Sarah," Mother Superior said, sliding a blood-stained envelope across her desk. This came with the lawyer's letter. Sarah opened it carefully, reading the haunting message. "Forgive me for keeping you away. They're coming back. Look in the library." "There's something else," Mother Superior added, her face grave. "Your grandmother tried to contact us several weeks ago. She mentioned imminent danger, but wouldn't elaborate. I thought you should know." Now, standing in the massive library, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The mansion was eerily quiet, except for the occasional creaking of old wood. She pulled out her phone and dialed the local police number, but stopped when she noticed something odd about the bloody handprint. There was a deliberate mark pointing to the book's spine. With shaking hands, she pulled the book out. "Records of Hope, 1943 to 1945, the title read. As she opened it, a small key fell to the floor with a metallic clink. The sound echoed through the library, followed by something else, footsteps coming from somewhere behind the shelves. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. The steps grew closer. "Hello," she called out, her voice wavering. "Is anyone there?" The footsteps stopped. Complete silence fell over the library. Sarah backed away slowly, clutching the book and key. Her elbow hit another shelf, causing several books to tumble down. As she bent to pick them up, she noticed a security camera hidden among the volumes, its red light blinking steadily. Why would her grandmother need such surveillance in a private library? The mystery deepened when Sarah found an old newspaper clipping that had fallen from the book. It showed Eleanor entering the library the night she died, timestamp clear in the corner. But Eleanor's body had been found in the garden the next morning. Sarah's phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from an unknown number. "You're asking the right questions, but be careful who you trust." The sound of footsteps returned, this time from multiple directions. Sarah clutched the book tighter, her heart racing. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, creating dark corners where anyone could hide. She needed answers, but first, she needed to get out of the library. As she moved toward the door, she noticed more security cameras, all seemingly active. Who was watching? And what had her grandmother gotten herself into? The floor creaked behind her. Sarah spun around, but the spaces between the bookshelves were empty. Yet somehow, she knew she wasn't alone. Her grandmother's last warning echoed in her mind. "They're coming back." Sarah reached for the library door, only to find it locked. The key she'd found now felt heavy in her pocket. As she pulled it out, she noticed strange markings on it, numbers that looked like coordinates. The footsteps were getting closer. Sarah had to make a choice, try the key on the door or follow whatever clue her grandmother had left her. Either way, she was about to uncover secrets that would change her life forever. Sarah rushed through the library's dark corridors, her footsteps echoing against the wooden floors. The mysterious key felt warm in her hand as she reached a section of paneled wall that looked different from the others. Her heart nearly stopped when she discovered a hidden panel containing a modern security system, complete with multiple video feeds showing every corner of the mansion. "I see you've found Eleanor's eyes," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to find an elderly woman in a gray dress watching her intently. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. I've been here for 30 years. Something about the woman's stance seemed oddly alert for someone her age. She stood too straight, her eyes too sharp and calculating. "The security system," Sarah said. "Why would my grandmother need all this?" Eleanor had her reasons. Mrs. Peterson moved closer, studying Sarah's face. "You look just like your mother." Sarah's breath caught. "You knew my mother. Everyone did back then, before the incident." Mrs. Peterson turned abruptly. "You should be careful what you go looking for, Sister Sarah. Some doors are better left closed." Before Sarah could respond, a man's voice called from the main hall. "Hello, anyone home?" Mrs. Peterson's expression hardened. That would be Jacob Klein, history professor at the local college. He's been asking questions about the mansion for months. Sarah walked to the main hall to find a man in his mid-30s examining the walls with unusual interest. He turned, offering a friendly smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sister Sarah Matthews, I'm Jacob Klein. I was hoping to talk to you about your grandmother's historical preservation work." The way he emphasized those last words made Sarah suspicious. "How did you know I was here?" "Small town," he shrugged, but his eyes darted to one of the hidden cameras. He knew about them. A loud beeping suddenly came from the security panel. Sarah rushed back to find multiple red lights flashing on the screens. Someone was trying to access the mansion's grounds. "Proximity alert," Mrs. Peterson explained, appearing suddenly. Eleanor installed them after the break-in attempt started. "Break-ins?" Sarah asked. "When?" "About 6 months ago, right after she started receiving the threats." Jacob stepped forward. "You should check the garage. There's something you need to see." In the garage, Sarah found filing cabinets filled with surveillance photos of prominent town residents. One recent image showed Eleanor meeting with a group of nuns, all of whom had reportedly gone missing in the past year. "Your grandmother kept tabs on everyone," Jacob said. "But the question is, was she watching them or watching out for them?" Sarah picked up a photo that made her blood run cold. Her mother, much younger, standing with Eleanor and the missing nuns. The date stamp was just months before Sarah was left at the orphanage. "Why didn't you tell her everything?" Mrs. Peterson muttered, staring at the photo. "She deserves to know." Before Sarah could demand answers, the security system blared again. On the screens, dark figures moved across the mansion grounds, heading toward the library. "They're early," Mrs. Peterson said, suddenly sounding like a different person entirely. Her frail demeanor vanished as she moved with military precision toward a hidden panel. "Sister Sarah, you need to make a choice right now. Do you want to know the truth about your grandmother, about your mother? Because once you do, there's no going back." The figures were getting closer. Sarah looked at the photo in her hand, then at the security screens showing the approaching threat. Whatever secrets this mansion held, they were worth killing for. And now she had to decide, run or face the truth that had kept her family in shadows for so long. The security alarm grew louder. Time was running out. Mrs. Peterson moved swiftly, pressing a hidden switch that revealed a narrow staircase behind the library's paneling. "Down. Now." Sarah hesitated, but the sound of breaking glass from above made the decision for her. She rushed down the stairs, followed by Jacob and Mrs. Peterson, who sealed the entrance behind them. The staircase led to a bunker that looked nothing like what Sarah expected. Instead of a World War II relic, she found herself in what appeared to be a modern command center. Multiple screens lined the walls, showing feeds from cameras throughout the city. Advanced communication equipment blinked and hummed. "Your grandmother wasn't just a wealthy woman with a passion for history," Mrs. Peterson said, typing rapidly on a keyboard. "This was her real life's work." The screen suddenly displayed a map of underground tunnels spreading beneath Millbrook like a spider's web. Red dots blinked at various locations. "Those are active safe houses," Jacob explained, "part of a modern underground railroad." Sarah noticed fresh coffee cups on a desk and an open laptop. "Someone's been here recently." "The network never sleeps," Mrs. Peterson replied. "Human traffickers don't take holidays, so neither do we." A sudden alert flashed across the screens. "Motion detected in Tunnel 7. "That's impossible," Mrs. Peterson muttered. "That section was sealed last week." Jacob moved to another monitor. "Someone's accessed the emergency protocols. They're trying to override the security system." Sarah spotted a familiar book on the desk, the same one that had contained the key upstairs. But this copy was newer, filled with handwritten notes and what looked like coded messages. "Your grandmother knew they were coming for her," Mrs. Peterson said. "She left protocols in place, instructions for you." "Why me?" Sarah asked. "I'm just a nun." "Are you?" Jacob challenged. "Or is that where Eleanor placed you to keep you safe?" Before Sarah could respond, the lights flickered. Security feeds began shutting down one by one. "They're cutting power to the bunker," Mrs. Peterson announced. "We need to move. Now." "Wait." Sarah grabbed the book. "Who are they? What do they want?" A message flashed across the remaining active screen. Sister Sarah Matthews located, proceeding with extraction. "They're not here for the bunker," Jacob realized. "They're here for you." Mrs. Peterson pulled a gun from a hidden compartment, transforming completely from elderly housekeeper to trained operative. "Eleanor's enemies have waited years for this moment. When she died, they knew you'd inherit everything, including her information network." The bunker plunged into darkness, emergency lights casting red shadows across the walls. Through the speakers came the sound of footsteps in the tunnels, growing closer. "Your grandmother wasn't just saving people," Jacob said urgently. "She was gathering evidence against some of the most powerful traffickers in the world. Evidence that would destroy them. Evidence she hid somewhere in this mansion," Mrs. Peterson added. "Evidence they think you know how to find." The emergency lights began failing one by one. Sarah clutched the book tighter, remembering her grandmother's bloody handprint pointing to it in the library. "Eleanor left something for you," Mrs. Peterson said. "Something they're willing to kill for. We need to get you out of here." A loud bang echoed through the tunnels. They were breaching the sealed sections. "Choose now, Sister Sarah," Jacob urged. "Run and stay safe, or stay and learn the truth about who you really are." The last emergency light flickered, leaving them in near total darkness. Sarah could hear the intruders getting closer, their footsteps echoing through the tunnel system. Whatever her grandmother had hidden, whatever truth she died protecting, Sarah realized she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. The choice had been made the moment she'd found that blood-stained note. Mrs. Peterson led them through a hidden exit, just as the intruders breached the bunker. They emerged in an old storage room behind the local church, where Padre Michael waited. "They found us sooner than expected," he said, leading them to his office. Eleanor's list was right again. Sarah pulled out the book she'd taken from the bunker. What list? Jacob opened his laptop, revealing photographs of prominent figures. Your grandmother kept detailed records of potential targets, corrupt officials, business leaders, anyone involved in trafficking operations. Which made her dangerous, Mrs. Peterson added, especially when she started connecting them to powerful families here in Millbrook. A car screeched to a halt outside the church. Through the window, Sarah saw Richard Blackwood, head of the town's most influential family, storming toward the entrance. "Right on schedule," Padre Michael muttered. Blackwood burst into the office. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Eleanor's evidence. Hand it over, or things will get unpleasant." "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah stood her ground, "this is a house of God, and your grandmother was a meddling fool who didn't know when to stop digging." He stepped closer. "People are disappearing, Sister Sarah. Don't follow her path." After Blackwood left, Jacob revealed his true identity. "I'm not really a history professor. I work for an international task force investigating war crimes and human trafficking. Eleanor was our primary informant. Why didn't she tell me any of this?" Sarah asked. "Because knowledge is dangerous," Mrs. Peterson said. "Eleanor's own daughter, your mother, had to disappear because of what she knew." Padre Michael moved to lock his office door. Eleanor wasn't just documenting crimes. She was tracking a global organization that's been operating since World War II. A phone rang. Mrs. Peterson answered, her face growing pale. Another one missing. Maria Chen, the librarian who helped Eleanor research old shipping records. Sarah remembered Maria from her childhood visits to the public library. "This has to stop." "It gets worse," Jacob said, showing her his screen. 3 nuns from different orders have vanished in the past month. All were investigating suspicious activities at their churches. "Eleanor knew they would come for you," Padre Michael said. "That's why she left safeguards. Deadman switches." Sarah opened the book again, finding a hidden message. The truth lies in plain sight, where faith meets history. Suddenly, the church bells began ringing, at 3 p.m., hours off schedule. "They're here," Mrs. Peterson pulled her gun again. "Who?" Sarah demanded. "The cleaners," Jacob explained. "They eliminate loose ends, and right now, that's us." The sound of footsteps echoed through the church halls. "Your grandmother had a plan," Padre Michael said quickly, "but you have to trust us completely. Are you ready?" Sarah looked at the book in her hands. then at the approaching shadows under the door. Everything she believed about her life, her family, her calling, it was all part of something bigger. The footsteps stopped outside the office. It was time to choose. Trust these strangers with her life, or risk losing everything Eleanor died to protect. Sarah sat in the church basement, examining documents Eleanor had hidden inside a false altar. Bank records showed massive transfers to offshore accounts, evidence of bribes, and lists of officials who'd been compromised. Your grandmother wasn't just gathering evidence, Jacob explained. She was following the money. Human trafficking leaves a paper trail. But some of these payments came from church accounts. Sarah's hands trembled as she read. Our own parishes. Mrs. Peterson nodded grimly. Evil hides behind respected institutions. That's why Eleanor's work was so dangerous and so important. A security feed on Jacob's laptop showed men in suits still searching the church above. They'd barely escaped through a hidden passage Padre Michael had revealed moments before they breached his office. Eleanor knew the risks, Jacob said, moving closer to Sarah. She built this network over decades, infiltrating organizations, gaining trust, saving lives. Sarah found a letter addressed to her. Inside was a key card and more coordinates. She planned everything. Because she knew they'd come for you, Mrs. Peterson checked her weapon. You're her heir, not just to the mansion, but to her mission. Sarah stood abruptly. I took vows. I can't just... Your vows, Jacob interrupted, were part of her plan. The church provides cover, access, and resources. Eleanor arranged your path to the convent years ago. The revelation hit Sarah like physical blow. My whole life, my calling, it wasn't real. Your faith is real, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. Eleanor just helped direct it where it could do the most good. Footsteps above made them freeze. Through air vents they heard voices. The girl knows nothing, Blackwood was saying. Eleanor would never trust a nun with sensitive information. The Mother Superior disagrees, another voice responded. Says the girl's special, different. Sarah's phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. Time to choose. Faith without works is dead, E. Those coordinates, Jacob pointed to Eleanor's letter, they lead to something bigger than evidence. Don't you want to know what? Sarah thought of the missing nuns, of Maria Chen, of all the people Eleanor had saved. Her grandmother had built something extraordinary, a modern underground railroad hiding behind respectable facades. If I help you, she said slowly, people will die. People are already dying, Mrs. Peterson countered. The question is, will you do something about it? The voices above grew closer. They were heading toward the basement. Eleanor left you a choice, Jacob said urgently. Stay safe in your convent, or finish what she started. Sarah looked at her habit, her symbol of devotion. But hadn't Jesus himself overturned tables in the temple? Hadn't he fought against those who used religion to hide their sins? The basement door creaked open. Choose now, Mrs. Peterson whispered. Sarah clutched Eleanor's letter. Her grandmother had sacrificed everything to build this network. Could she do any less? The footsteps descended the stairs. In that moment, Sarah realized true faith wasn't about hiding in safety. It was about standing up against darkness, whatever the cost. She reached for the key card. Show me what to do. Sarah entered the coordinates from Eleanor's letter into Jacob's laptop, revealing a hidden database. Names, dates, and locations filled the screen. Hundreds of rescued victims, safe houses across the country. Each red dot is an active rescue operation, Jacob explained. Your grandmother built the largest underground rescue network in the country. The basement door burst open. Instead of Blackwood's men, a group of children rushed in, led by a woman Sarah recognized from Eleanor's photos. Agent Martinez, Mrs. Peterson nodded. Right on time. The church isn't safe anymore, Martinez said. We need to move these kids now. Sarah stared at the children. They're from my orphanage. Their parents were rescued by Eleanor, Martinez explained. We hide them in plain sight until their families are safe. One girl caught Sarah's attention, Annie, who'd arrived just last month. Her mother is being tracked by traffickers in Boston, Jacob finished. We're working on extraction. Suddenly, Sarah's phone rang. Mother Superior's number. Don't answer, Mrs. Peterson warned. The convent's compromised, but Sarah was already hitting accept. Mother Superior. Sarah, where are you? Her voice was tense. Men came asking questions. They threatened to close our orphanage. Tell her nothing, Jacob whispered. Sarah's mind raced. I'm safe, but the children are in danger, Mother Superior cut in. 3 more arrived today. They say their parents sent them to find Eleanor. Martinez grabbed the phone. Initiate Protocol 7, now. Mother Superior's voice changed completely. Understood. Safe room activated. Wait, Sarah said. You're part of this. Half the nuns in the state are part of Eleanor's network, Martinez explained. Your grandmother recruited strategically. The laptop beeped. New red dots appeared. Multiple breaches, Jacob reported. They're hitting safe houses across the city. How did they find them? Mrs. Peterson demanded. Sarah studied the map. The tunnels. They're using Eleanor's own network against us. Martinez gathered the children. We need to split up. Sister Sarah, you're with me. The kids trust you. But the evidence, Sarah started, isn't just documents, Jacob said. It's these kids, their stories, their families. Save them and you prove everything. Sarah looked at Annie, remembering her first day at the orphanage. How many more children were out there waiting for help? The van's out back, Martinez said, but we need to move now. Voices echoed from above. Blackwood's men had returned. Mrs. Peterson handed Sarah a burner phone. Eleanor left instructions. Trust your instincts. Sarah grabbed Annie's hand. In her other hand, Eleanor's book felt heavy with purpose. Ready? Martinez asked. The children looked at Sarah with trust in their eyes, just like they did at the orphanage, just like they had with Eleanor. Footsteps pounded on the stairs. Time to become who she was meant to be. Ready, Sarah said, and stepped into her grandmother's world. The van sped through back roads as Sarah held Annie close. Martinez drove expertly, avoiding main streets where cameras might track them. Your mother's waiting at the next safe house, a familiar voice said from the back. Sarah turned to find a woman she'd only seen in photographs. Mom, Sarah's voice cracked. Huh. Hello, Sarah. Catherine Matthews moved forward. I know you have questions. 17 years worth, Sarah managed. Eleanor trained me after she saved me, Catherine explained. I was supposed to take over, but they found us. Leaving you at the orphanage was the only way to keep you safe. Headlights flashed behind them. Martinez cursed. We've got company. The children first, Catherine ordered, her training evident. Everything else can wait. They pulled into an abandoned factory. Inside, nuns from different orders worked at computers, coordinating rescue operations. Sister Margaret, Sarah recognized faces from her own convent. Sister Claire, welcome to the real mission, Sister Margaret smiled. A screen showed security footage of other nuns being arrested. They're targeting our people, Martinez reported. Someone gave them a list. Father Michael, Catherine's face darkened. He was Eleanor's confidant, but he was compromised months ago. He helped us escape, Sarah protested. To track us, Martinez pulled up more footage. He's working with Blackwood. Sarah remembered the priest's strange behavior. Why? The church is investigating corruption, Catherine explained. Michael chose the wrong side to protect. Annie tugged Sarah's sleeve. Sister Sarah, the bad men are coming. Security feeds showed vehicles approaching the factory. Eleanor knew this would happen. Catherine pulled out a tablet. That's why she left a failsafe. But activating it means no going back. Every corrupt official, every compromised priest, every dirty cop, their names go public. It would destroy the organization, Martinez added, but also hurt innocent people. Churches closed, reputations ruined. Eleanor died protecting this trigger. Catherine said, she wanted you to decide. Sarah looked at Annie, at the other children they'd saved, at her mother, who'd sacrificed everything to fight this evil. Banging at the factory doors, time running out. The truth, Sarah realized, sets us free. She took the tablet, fingers hovering over the trigger that would change everything. Eleanor said you'd understand, Catherine smiled. Even before you knew who you really were. The doors burst open. Father Michael led the charge, armed men behind him. Sarah, he called out, think about what you're doing. She looked at her mother, at the children, at the nuns who dedicated their lives to this mission. I am, she said, and pressed the button. The truth was about to change the world. Alarms blared as Eleanor's dead man's switch activated. On every screen, files began uploading to news outlets worldwide. Get the children to the tunnel, Catherine ordered, as chaos erupted. Father Michael raised his hands. Sarah, you don't understand what you've done. Show her, Martinez commanded. Two nuns grabbed Michael, revealing a wire under his collar. He was gathering intel, Catherine explained, building cases against our allies. To protect the church, Michael shouted. Eleanor's evidence will destroy everything. Sarah opened her grandmother's book again, finding a hidden USB drive. No, just the corruption. New files appeared on the screens, evidence of Michael's collaboration, of church officials taking bribes to look the other way. Eleanor knew, Sarah realized. She kept tracking you, even after you turned. The church assigned me to investigate, Michael's facade crumbled, but the deeper I dug, the more I found how high this went. Cardinals, bishops. So you chose power over justice, Catherine's voice was cold. Gunfire erupted outside. Blackwood's men had arrived. The tunnels, Martinez urged. Now. As they rushed the children toward safety, Sarah's phone buzzed. A final message from Eleanor. The mansion's basement. What seems like an end is just the beginning. More evidence, Sarah asked her mother. Something bigger, Catherine replied. Eleanor built a fallback plan, a new network hidden from everyone, even me. The building shook with explosions. They're destroying everything, Martinez reported. Sarah looked at the children, at Michael being led away, at her mother who'd sacrificed everything for this fight. The mansion, she decided. Whatever Eleanor left, we need it now. It's too dangerous, Catherine protested. That's why she chose me, Sarah realized, because I had nothing to lose, but everything to fight for. Through the chaos of Eleanor's revelations tearing through the city, Sarah understood. Her grandmother's legacy wasn't just evidence or networks. It was the courage to stand against evil, whatever the cost. Take the children to safety, she told her mother. I'm going to finish what Eleanor started. Catherine hugged her for the first time in 17 years. You already have. The building rocked with another explosion. Time to face whatever waited in the mansion's depths. Time to become who she was always meant to be. Eleanor's true heir. Sarah reached the mansion through maintenance tunnels as Eleanor's revelations threw the city into chaos. Police sirens wailed. Emergency broadcasts detailed arrests of prominent figures. Blackwood's in custody, Jacob reported through her earpiece, but his superiors are mobilizing. Sarah entered the basement using Eleanor's keycard. Motion sensors activated, revealing a hidden command center larger than the church bunker. They'll trace the leaks here, Mrs. Peterson's voice crackled. You have minutes. Screens lit up automatically, showing a global network far bigger than anyone imagined. Safe houses, operatives, resources. My God, Sarah whispered. Eleanor built an army. A video started playing. Eleanor's face appeared, recorded days before her death. Sarah, if you're seeing this, you've chosen to continue our work. What we've exposed today is just the beginning. The evidence was bait, to flush out their operation. A map appeared, showing hundreds of connected locations. The real mission starts now, Eleanor continued. These are camps where they're holding thousands. Children, women, dissidents. Our public network was compromised, so I built this. A shadow organization ready to strike. Footsteps above. They'd found her. You have one chance, Eleanor's recording continued. Activate Protocol Omega. It will deploy everything, resources, operatives, evidence, a simultaneous strike worldwide. They're breaching the upper floors, Jacob warned. Sarah's hands hovered over the console. This wasn't just exposing corruption anymore. This was war. Eleanor trusted you, Catherine's voice came through, because you understand, sometimes faith requires action. The basement door exploded. Through smoke, Richard Blackwood entered, but not in handcuffs. Step away, he ordered. You've caused enough damage. You were arrested, Sarah said. By whom? My own people. He laughed. We own the system, Sister Sarah. Your grandmother never understood that. She understood perfectly, Sarah replied, remembering Eleanor's words about bait and traps. More men entered, but Sarah saw what they didn't, the recognition signals on their gear matching locations on Eleanor's map. She wasn't just exposing them, she was identifying their entire infrastructure. Last chance, Blackwood raised his weapon. Step away. Sarah looked at Eleanor's face on the screen, still paused in mid-speech, at the map showing thousands waiting for rescue. Her grandmother had built this network in secret for years, knowing it would take someone with nothing left to lose to activate it. Someone whose faith in justice outweighed their fear. I am my grandmother's heir, Sarah said, and pressed the button. Protocol Omega launched, and the world began to change. The command center erupted in chaos as Protocol Omega initiated. Across the wall of screens, hundreds of locations pulsed with activity. Safe houses activating, teams mobilizing, years of Eleanor's careful planning springing to life in a synchronized global response. Teams deploying worldwide. Jacob's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece, tight with controlled excitement. London team in position. Bangkok units moving. Berlin squad reporting ready. This is it, Sarah. Everything your grandmother built is coming online. Sarah watched transfixed as green dots representing Eleanor's operatives converged on red targets worldwide. Each point of light represented lives waiting to be saved, justice waiting to be served. Multiple units breaching primary targets, Martinez reported from another screen. 30 successful entries, 50, 75. They had no idea how big our network was. Blackwood's men moved to stop her, weapons raised, but hidden panels in the walls slid open with pneumatic hisses. Armed figures emerged from concealed rooms, Eleanor's secret security force, positioned years ago for exactly this moment. Sarah recognized faces among them, former trafficking victims, retired law enforcement, people whose lives Eleanor had touched, all waiting in the shadows to play their part. Your grandmother had a backup for everything. Mrs. Peterson stepped from a hidden door, her weapon trained steadily on Blackwood. Her elderly housekeeper persona had completely vanished, replaced by the bearing of a seasoned operative. Including you, Mr. Blackwood. Did you really think she'd leave this place unprotected? Thunder crashed outside as the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows with apocalyptic fury, as if nature itself was responding to the magnitude of what they'd set in motion. The tunnels. Sarah's blood ran cold as realization struck. With this much rain, water's already rising in the lower levels. Catherine's voice crackled through her earpiece, tight with concern. We couldn't evacuate everyone in time. There are still children down there. Sarah rushed to Eleanor's maps, scanning the underground network. Dozens of red dots pulsed in the tunnel system, each one representing a life at risk. How many had they missed in their rush to launch Protocol Omega? The floodgates, Blackwood's laugh held genuine amusement. Such a shame someone ordered them opened remotely. Amazing how these old drainage systems can malfunction, isn't it? Especially during such a terrible storm. Warning lights began flashing across the command center's screens. Water was pouring into the lower tunnels at an alarming rate. You'll kill innocent children. Sarah faced him, horror and fury warring in her voice. They have nothing to do with this. Collateral damage, he shrugged, the gesture elegant and dismissive. A regrettable necessity. This ends tonight, one way or another. Eleanor's little network dies here. The screens showed water levels rising rapidly. Sarah could see people moving through the tunnels, dots clustering as they sought higher ground. Time was running out. She had to choose, stay and protect Eleanor's command center, ensure Protocol Omega completed its worldwide mission, or save the children trapped below. The weight of generations of work hung against immediate lives at risk. Go, Mrs. Peterson's voice cut through her turmoil. We'll hold them here. This is what Eleanor built the network for, to save lives, not just collect evidence. Sarah ran for the tunnels, Eleanor's book clutched tight against her chest. The water was rising faster than she'd feared, already ankle-deep at the entrance. Left at the next junction, Jacob guided her through her earpiece, watching her progress on the monitors. They're gathered in the old storage section. Looks like 12 signatures. No, 14. Multiple children. She splashed through growing puddles, her modified habit heavy with water. Ahead, scared voices echoed off the stone walls. Annie appeared first, leading a group of younger children through the darkness. Her face lit up with relief at the sight of Sarah. The main exit's blocked, she reported, showing a leadership beyond her years. Water's coming from both sides. We tried going higher, but... Sarah pulled out Eleanor's book, pages wrinkled with moisture. Her grandmother never left anything to chance. There had to be another way out. The water reached their knees, its rise steady and merciless. The youngest children were already struggling to stay upright in the current. There. Sarah spotted markings on the wall that matched symbols in the book. Eleanor left an emergency exit. She planned for everything. They found the hidden door, but the electronic lock was dead, its panel dark. "Power's out in this whole section," Jacob reported, frustration evident. The water must have shorted the auxiliary systems. The water rose higher, forcing them to help the children climb onto storage crates. The ceiling felt oppressively close as their dry space shrank. Sarah remembered Eleanor's words from the video. "Faith without works is dead." She located a maintenance panel, tried Eleanor's key card. Nothing. The water reached their waists. The children's terrified whimpers echoed in the confined space. "Sarah," Catherine's voice barely cut through the static. "Eleanor always said, when all else fails, go back to the beginning." The beginning. Sarah looked at the blood-stained book that had started everything, the key from the library, the coordinates that had seemed random. Understanding struck. They weren't just location markers. They were a code, a failsafe within the failsafe. Sarah input the numbers as water kept rising. Children cried in the dark. Annie helped keep the youngest ones calm, showing the same spirit that had first drawn Eleanor's attention. A click. The door opened with a groan of protesting metal. She helped them through one by one, counting heads as the tunnel groaned under the increasing pressure. The last child cleared the door just as the ceiling began to collapse. Chunks of concrete splashed into the rising water. Sarah dove through the opening as the tunnel caved in behind her, the roar of collapsing stone and rushing water chasing her through. They emerged in the church basement, soaked but alive. Sarah did another head count, relief flooding her as each face appeared in the emergency lights. Her phone buzzed, a message from the command center. Evidence secured, Blackwood in custody. For real this time. Protocol Omega successful on all fronts. Sarah held Annie close, watching as other children reunited with parents who had been waiting, part of Eleanor's network all along. Each reunion represented another piece of her grandmother's legacy. Outside, sirens wailed as Eleanor's network continued dismantling decades of corruption. The storm raged on, but they were safe. Sometimes, Sarah realized, the greatest acts of faith happened in the dark. And sometimes miracles looked like a grandmother's careful planning combined with a granddaughter's courage to see it through. "Thank you," Annie whispered, still holding tight to Sarah's hand, "for coming back for us." Sarah squeezed her hand in return. That's what family does. And in that moment, soaked to the skin in a church basement, surrounded by saved children, Sarah finally understood what Eleanor had been building all along. Dawn broke over Millbrook as Sarah sat in the renovated command center, watching news reports cascade across the screens. Eleanor's network had struck with surgical precision, coordinated raids freeing thousands of victims and arresting hundreds of traffickers, corrupt officials, and their enablers across the globe. Moscow team reporting complete success, Jacob announced, monitoring feeds. Paris operations secured all targets. Tokyo unit just confirmed final extractions. Sarah barely registered the victories, her mind still processing the revelation that had shaken her world minutes earlier. "Your grandmother planned this for decades," Catherine explained, seated beside her daughter for the first time in 17 years. Every detail, every contingency, every piece positioned perfectly. She built this like the master chess player she was. But her death. Sarah's voice trailed off, still struggling with the implications. Was her final gambit. Jacob brought up security footage from the night Eleanor supposedly died. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., precisely when police reports listed her time of death. Watch carefully. The library footage showed Eleanor deliberately creating the blood trail that had started Sarah's journey. The elderly woman moved with purpose, nothing like the frail grandmother Sarah had imagined. She knew they were closing in, Mrs. Peterson added, cleaning her weapon nearby. The organization had infiltrated too deeply. She needed them to think they'd won. "But they found her body in the garden," Sarah protested. "I saw the police reports." "You saw what Eleanor wanted everyone to see," Catherine smiled. "The garden body was staged. DNA tests were falsified. Your grandmother had allies in every level of law enforcement." A new alert flashed across the main screen, drawing everyone's attention. Live footage from a secure location in Switzerland filled the display. There, very much alive and looking remarkably spry, sat Eleanor Matthews. "Hello, Sarah." Her grandmother's smile was warm but held hints of regret. I know you must have so many questions, so much anger perhaps. The deception was necessary, but the pain it caused you, that was the hardest part of all this. Sarah gripped the desk for support, her legs suddenly unsteady. You're alive. And coming home, Eleanor nodded. Thanks to you, it's finally safe. You did exactly what I hoped. No, what I knew you would do. You chose justice over safety, faith over fear, just like your mother did all those years ago. The children in the tunnels, Sarah said, pieces falling into place. You knew I'd choose them over the command center. That's why you positioned the backup servers elsewhere. Because that's who you are, Sarah, who I raised you to be, even from a distance. Every book I made sure found its way to you at the orphanage. Every nun I positioned to guide your development. Every seemingly random event that led you to take your vows. It was all preparation. Eleanor's image leaned forward, her eyes intense. The network is yours now, Sarah. You've proven beyond any doubt that you're ready. The way you handled Protocol Omega, how you balanced the mission with saving those children, you've surpassed all my hopes. What about my vows? Sarah touched her modified habit, the church. Sometimes Eleanor's smile turned knowing. The greatest service to God is fighting the evil that hides in His name. You'll find the Vatican has been quietly supportive of our work for years. Why do you think they approved your transfer to that particular convent? Screens around them showed the aftermath of their operation. Father Michael confessing everything, his testimony implicating dozens of corrupt officials. Blackwood revealing his organization's entire structure in exchange for protection. Children reuniting with parents they'd thought lost forever. Your mother and I built this network piece by piece, Eleanor continued. But you, Sarah, you made it work. You brought everything into the light. Your faith gave our mission the moral compass it needed. New footage appeared, security camera clips showing Eleanor's movements over the past months, coordinating with operatives, meeting with Vatican officials, preparing safe houses. When can you come home? Sarah asked, suddenly feeling like a little girl who'd missed too many years with her grandmother. I'm already on my way, Eleanor replied. There's so much work still to do, and this time we'll do it together, all of us. The screen split to show Eleanor boarding a private plane, her movements still spry despite her years. The network is fully mobilized, Jacob reported, checking status updates. Every safe house is secure, every operative in position. The organization is crippled, but there will be holdouts. Eleanor's sacrifice forced them to reveal themselves. Mrs. Bai, Peterson added, their desperation to find her evidence made them sloppy. Now they have nowhere to hide. Sarah held her grandmother's book, understanding finally why Eleanor had chosen her. Not because she was family, though that mattered. Not because she'd been carefully hidden and prepared, though that had been necessary, but because she had the strength to face the darkness without losing her light. The ability to fight evil without becoming it. We'll be landing in 3 hours, Eleanor said, her image now showing the plane's interior. Ready to begin your real training. There's so much more to show you. The network needs a new generation of leadership, Catherine added. Someone who can bridge the gap between the shadows we work in and the light we serve. Sarah touched the cross at her neck, then looked at the screens showing their worldwide network of justice in action. Rescue operations continuing, evidence being secured, lives being saved. Everything she'd thought she knew about her life had changed, yet her core purpose remained the same, to serve God by protecting His children. The only difference was scale. I've been ready my whole life, she answered, straightening her shoulders. I just didn't know it. Eleanor's smile filled the screen. Then let's begin. The sun rose higher over Millbrook as Sarah began coordinating with global teams, her mother and Mrs. Gay, Peterson at her side, Jacob manning the communications. They had 3 hours until Eleanor landed, and there was still so much work to do. But for the first time, they would face it together. 3 generations of Matthews women, united in purpose, backed by a network of light pushers fighting back the dark. The truth had finally emerged, and with it, a new chapter was beginning. 3 months after Eleanor's return, the Matthews mansion had transformed from a fortress of secrets into a beacon of hope. The newly established Matthews Foundation for Children's Protection operated openly, its mission clear, to combat trafficking and protect the vulnerable through a unique combination of faith-based activism and strategic intervention. Sarah stood in the renovated library, now a state-of-the-art command center where operators coordinated rescues worldwide. The same room where she'd first found Eleanor's blood-stained message now pulsed with purpose, screens displaying active operations across the globe. Bangkok team reports another successful extraction, Eleanor announced from her station, her voice carrying the same strength that had built this network. 37 children secured. Local authorities are processing the traffickers now. Sarah studied the tactical display, watching green dots representing their operatives escort the rescued children to safety. Each point of light represented a life changed, a future restored. The Vatican's official approval just arrived. Catherine entered, holding a thick envelope bearing papal seals. The Sisters of Sacred Protection are now a recognized order within the Church. They're calling it a revolutionary approach to faith-based humanitarian intervention. Your idea to combine active mission work with traditional religious vows was inspired, Eleanor smiled at her granddaughter. It gives us legitimate cover while honoring genuine calling, the perfect balance of shadows and light. Sarah adjusted her modified habit, now redesigned for fieldwork while maintaining its spiritual significance. Throughout the mansion, other nuns in similar attire coordinated operations, their faith strengthened by direct action against evil. Mrs. Peterson's latest training class graduates next week, Jacob reported, pulling up personnel files. 50 former trafficking victims now trained as operatives. They're some of our best people. They understand the mission at the deepest level. Annie burst into the command center, her young face bright with purpose. Now part of their youth outreach program, she helped other rescued children adjust to freedom. Sister Sarah, the Thailand safe house sent new updates. She pointed excitedly to the main screen where rescued children shared messages of thanks. Their smiles, once unthinkable in their darkness, now shone with hope and possibility. Eleanor was right all along, Catherine squeezed Sarah's hand. You were born for this work. We all were, in our own ways. We just needed someone to show us how to combine faith with action, Sarah replied, watching their global network pulse with activity. To prove that contemplation and intervention aren't opposites, they're partners. The mansion's new security system activated, announcing the arrival of their monthly oversight committee. A group of bishops and Vatican representatives entered, still adjusting to this radical new approach to religious ministry. They're still nervous, Eleanor observed quietly. Change doesn't come easily to ancient institutions. But it comes, Sarah said firmly. Real faith adapts and grows. It has to, or it becomes just empty ritual. She touched the cross at her neck, remembering her journey from confused novice to confident leader. Eleanor's blood-stained message seemed distant now. Faith without works is dead. Those words had launched her transformation from traditional nun to warrior for justice. Berlin team needs tactical support next week. Jacob checked his tablet. New trafficking route uncovered, looking like a major operation. I'll handle the briefing, Sarah nodded. After Sunday Mass, some traditions we keep. Eleanor smiled proudly at her granddaughter. You found your balance, between heaven and earth, between prayer and action, between being a nun and being a warrior. Between faith and works, Sarah added. They were never meant to be separated. The screens showed their expanding operation. Safe houses transformed into schools, rehabilitation centers staffed by trauma specialists, chapels where survivors could reconnect with their faith without fear, places where spiritual comfort met practical help. Matthew's Foundation Control, this is Prague Team, a voice came through the command center speakers. Priority 1 situation developing, multiple minors at risk, request immediate support. Sarah moved smoothly to the tactical station, her grandmother and mother flanking her naturally. 3 generations of Matthew's women, united in purpose after so many years apart. This is Sister Sarah, she responded, authority clear in her voice. Deploy rescue teams Alpha and Bravo. Activate local assets. Let's bring them home. As she coordinated another rescue, Sarah felt the rightness of it all. Her grandmother's legacy hadn't just exposed evil. It had created a sustainable way to fight it. Not through violence or vengeance, but through commitment and strategic action. Through faith made real by works. The Matthews women had built something extraordinary, a network of light bringers pushing back the darkness, a place where contemplation and action merged to create real change in the world. Throughout the mansion, operators coordinated raids while nuns led prayer services. Intelligence analysts worked alongside spiritual counselors. Former victims trained to become rescuers while receiving trauma therapy. It was a new model of faith in action, a way to fight darkness while maintaining light. "Ready?" Eleanor asked as the Prague operation entered its critical phase. Sarah looked at her family, her team, her mission, at the cross hanging beside the bank of computers, at the children's drawings decorating the tactical displays, artwork from those they'd already saved. "Ready," she answered with quiet confidence. "Let's go save some lives." And in that moment, standing between heaven and earth, Sarah knew with unshakable certainty this was always who she was meant to be. This was her true calling, a warrior for justice, a servant of faith, a light bringer in the darkness. The story of Eleanor, Catherine, and Sarah Matthews wasn't just about fighting evil. It was about transforming ancient institutions to serve modern needs, about combining spiritual conviction with practical action, about proving that sometimes the greatest acts of faith happen not in quiet churches, but in the moments when we choose to stand against darkness. As the sun set over Millbrook, the Matthews Foundation continued its work. Rescues were coordinated, lives were saved, faith was demonstrated through action. And in the command center that had once been a silent library, 3 generations of women led a revolution in how good confronted evil. Their work would never be finished, but they would face it together, armed with faith, strengthened by family, and dedicated to proving that light always pushes back the darkness. One rescue at a time, one soul at a time, one miracle at a time, the end. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of faith, courage, and justice, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered a legacy like Eleanor's? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that show how ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they stand up for what's right. Remember, sometimes the greatest acts of faith aren't performed in churches, but in the moments when we choose to fight darkness with light.